Having watched a good deal of the March for Our Lives rally, I now can't wait for this next generation to come of age and take the reins. These kids clearly represent the most competent, caring, thoughtful, well-spoken, passionate generation in quite some time. I see it in my own kids, especially in my 19-year-old stepdaughter, who is more tuned in and committed at 19 than I was at 39. In some ways, she still got me beat. But having been part of a generation which has failed so miserably on so many fronts, of which I share some blame, I wanted to pass along a few priorities I'm convinced this next generation can successfully pursue. This video is about the first of those priorities. When I was growing up, you whippersnappers. Okay, seriously, when I was growing up, there were a couple of phrases I heard with some regularity, which I no longer hear. And the fact that I no longer hear them is a sign that our culture has lost its mind, and a good deal of its heart. Filthy rich and obscene wealth. My parents were 45 and 47 when I was born, so my parents grew up in the midst of the Great Depression, and that experience colored their thinking for the rest of their lives. In particular, they learned that no one is beyond the reach of crippling, unforeseen global events, and that survival, let alone thriving in such an environment, was largely a matter of luck. And the more luck you had at the beginning, the better your chance of making it through. But they also learned the role that unbridled, unregulated greed played in destroying the entire world economy. These phrases, filthy rich and obscene wealth, went out of fashion in my late teens, when obscene wealth, which previously disgusted people, was transformed into lifestyles of the rich and famous, something to which people aspired. Yes, I blame Robin Leach, but there's plenty of blame to go around. It seems crazy now, but somehow just 40 years after the Great Depression ended, we as a nation forgot all about the poor. We convinced ourselves that opportunities were equally open to all and made a mad dash for the top, forgetting entirely those behind us. Everything that went into creating America's thriving middle class during the mixed economy of the 50s and 60s was tossed aside so that the few at the top could get even farther ahead and away from those too lazy or stupid to grab their own piece of the pie. Wealth was rewarded with drastically reduced taxes for those at the top. Financial institutions, which nearly destroyed us in the 20s, were once again unleashed to do whatever they could in pursuit of the almighty dollar. Unions, which kept wages high for those who were doing the heavy lifting, were busted and crippled at every turn. The filthy rich were even transformed into the noble and unassailable job creators, to whom the middle class would have to pay tribute in order to get the scraps that fell from their tables. The jobs which required us to be twice as productive and work longer hours for less money. Young people might remember that things came crashing down in 2007, not even 8 years after the repeal of the Glass-Steagall Act, which had kept our financial institutions in check for nearly 75 years. That's how quickly unbridled greed can disrupt civilization. Your family may have suffered the loss of a home or car, or one or both of your parents may have lost their jobs. Those things never had to happen. They happened because previous generations dropped the ball and began caring only about climbing the ladder, forgetting entirely those who were barely hanging on to begin with. In the last 40 years, CEO compensation, the amount paid to our top CEOs, was 271 times that of the average worker. In the last 40 years, CEO pay has increased 937%, while the average worker's wage has increased just 11.2%, adjusted for inflation. This increase in the wealth of the already wealthy was accompanied by a massive decrease in taxes, from a top marginal rate of 90+% in the 1950s to 28% in 1986. In 2012, Republican presidential candidate Mitt Romney paid only 13.9% taxes on his $20 million of income in 2011. Many people made far less and paid more as a percentage of their income. That's what I would call obscene. I'm not going to recommend solutions to this upcoming generation. I'll leave that to them. This, to me, is an ethos thing. The visceral feeling of disgust behind the phrases filthy rich and obscene wealth have to be felt once again by our young people. They have to realize that individuals having tens of billions of dollars, while others can't get their kids 3 square meals a day, is just gross. And that living in such a country is a shame, something that should not be tolerated. They have to realize that helping those less fortunate is far more important than another yacht, or a car elevator, or yet another $100,000 car, or diamond ring. That investing in our country, our public health, our education system, our infrastructure, our technology, and our people, who are the most valuable capital we have, will create the rising tide that lifts all boats, as opposed to the path my generation took, where the poor had to wait around hoping to be benevolently trickled on from above. What you kids grew up with, what my generation enabled, cannot go on. The wealth of our nation can't continue being redistributed up to those who already have more than they know what to do with. The playing field must be leveled, but that won't happen unless and until hearts and minds begin to change, and we remember this thing which caused the entire world of the 1930s to suffer like we've never known: greed. In the 1950s and 60s, one of America's most successful CEOs ran one of America's biggest car companies. While at the company, he practiced a community-minded business philosophy, condemning the growing ideal of rugged individualism as, quote, nothing but a political banner to cover up greed, end quote. He put his money where his mouth was when he returned a large bonus given to him by the company, thinking it excessive. Excessive. Do you hear that, young people? Excessive. By the way, that man was Mitt Romney's father, George Romney, who would become a major Republican Party leader in the 1960s. That's how much things have changed just in my lifetime. Fortunately, you, the young people of America, have the opportunity to change things again. So my hope is that you will let your hearts turn to the example of George Romney and his way of thinking.